Thank you all for joining us tonight, or in the morning. Depends on where you are in the world right now. I think we've got one international person with us currently, perhaps more to come. We're just going to hop through a few little opening introductions, and then we're going to get right into the main event here, and hear from some folks that you guys have come here to see tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Welcome. This is our very first Continuing Connections call. The goal for this is just to meet on a quarterly basis with our lovely participants and grads, get everyone together and focus on some industry topics of relevance. So the topic for this evening is going to be volunteer teaching. And let's just hop through a couple reminders before we get started. So we really don't know what size group we're going to see tonight. So just to make sure that we're facilitating these conversations effectively, let's keep our microphones muted unless instructed otherwise, and keep our cameras on if at all possible. I know some of you might be calling in at a very late hour in your time zone, so we understand if you don't want your camera on, but if you're able to, keep it on so that we can interact with each other and know who's on the other side of the screen. If you have questions during tonight's call, please drop them in the chat box. We do want this to be interactive. We are looking to spend some time with each speaker, and in between their interviews, open the floor to questions. So if anything crosses your mind while they're sharing about their experience, feel free to just drop it in the chat box and have fun. We want this to be an enjoyable experience for everyone tonight. All right, so a bit about our two speakers. I think that a lot of us on this call have interacted with Tim and Kim already, but particularly for folks that are watching this later, I just want to do a little recap here. So Tim is a pastor. He's based down in Florida, and he just completed a mission trip in Madagascar where he was volunteer teaching. So that is what we're going to hear a bit about this evening. Kim is a retired nurse. She's based up in Massachusetts, and she currently volunteer teaches here in the States domestically, and she works with Ukrainian refugees. So we've got an international experience and a domestic experience to share with you all this evening, and look forward to hearing your questions, comments, and discussions as we move through this. All righty, so Tim, are we ready to get started? You can unmute yourself, sir.
Now we're ready.
There we go. All right, so we're just going to spend roughly 10 minutes talking with Tim here, making sure that we all kind of have an overview of what his experience was like and some key components of it. And again, drop any questions that cross your mind down in the chat box as Tim and I are chatting here, okay? So Tim, welcome. Thank you again for participating in this event today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Would you mind sharing with folks just a little bit of like a recap about your experience?
All right. Briefly, I'm Tim Rogers Martin, and I live in Melbourne Beach, Florida. And besides teaching, which I love, I also like to kayak and photograph and fish and wander the beach and travel. In 2021, I semi-retired, and I went and visited 10 countries in a year. And one of those countries was Madagascar. Beautiful country. It's an island off the east of Africa. Whitney can show you where Madagascar is. Right over her ear. Yep. And good job. And while I was there, I got to interact with a lot of people from the Church of Jesus Christ in Madagascar, which was not even in existence 55 years ago. And now 6.5 million member people are in that church out of a population of 29 million. So about a quarter of the people have joined this church in the last 55 years, and they're growing quickly. And the Madagascar is a French colony that had a coup. Well, French colony till 60, had a coup in the 2000s, and the person that's in charge of Madagascar doesn't like English. The Church of Jesus Christ of Madagascar says we can't be world players without English. So they invited me to come and teach in their graduate schools, colleges, universities with their national staff to teach English. One problem is I don't know Malagasy or French, which is their secondary English language. English is third, fourth, fifth, sixth, who knows? But I decided to do it, and I'm very excited about doing it. And what I got out of it in a lot of ways was the relation. You got a job and then you got an adventure. And so in doing my job, I met some really cool people, and they were exciting to me, not just because they were different or smart or anything else, but we formed connections out of a love of education. And so while I was there, they introduced me not only to the academic and the worship environment, but to English clubs. And in the English clubs, it was more like what I anticipated. I thought I told Whitney, I hope I can teach 7 or 8 students. I would really get scared if I had 20 or 25, and I never had a class that small. It was 70 to 250. So I taught large classes, and then the English clubs were usually about 12 people, 15, 20, and that was where I could get a lot of really good one-on-one time. And then just the special people you met. I met this person, Newfie, who is a graduate student, and he led me to the English clubs. And I met Juliet, and she led me to where I could eat in people's houses and get to know the whole families, not just the students. And then I met Zara. She was a student that was a professor in her country, but wanted to do a PhD in a foreign land, and France accepted her in a PhD program, but denied her a visa. And so we got together, and she translated tons of stuff from English to Malagasy to use. And we traveled together and had just a great time. So I guess the things that really came out of that were being able to not only teach, but relate in a variety of contexts, including with people who are passionate about English and learning English and translating English, which is a step I didn't anticipate at first.
So Tim, I'm curious, after hearing that intro of your experience, what was the day-to-day like?
Every day was different. Usually would have to get up before sunrise, and you don't know if there'll be any electricity. Electricity went off every day at least once, probably 2 times a day, sometimes 3. Some planned, some unplanned. And so I'm a kind of wait to the last minute person to do my stuff. And you can't do that because you don't know you'll have electricity. And if electricity goes out, you don't have water or internet. And so you're just into another paradigm. So I get up early, and when I was in the capital city, I'd ride a taxi into the city, which meant passing by these kind of fog-laden rice fields, and then going climbing up to the top of the city and teaching in their seminary and their college. I did that probably 2/3 of the time there. I was somewhere in the capital city, and a third or a little bit more, I was traveling and teaching in some places that took 3 days just to journey to. So, but it start early and hope for the best, and you got to be adaptable.
So
Stay
how
up late if you want to talk to Whitney. Her regular coaching call is 11:30 Madagascar time PM, and then get up before daylight. So long days.
but yet, since you've been back in the States, how many times have you told me, Tim, that you wish the coaching calls were that?
Yeah, I'm a night person. I much prefer that to 11 or 3:30.
Yeah, we had some adventurous calls there with you where you were preparing for the upcoming day's lesson. So was there any standout experience, any highlight that you'd like to share with folks from your time in Madagascar?
Oh, there's lots, but I guess number one, being there as a guy from the United States, I didn't see 6 white people the whole time I was there. So that bought me cred. I was treated really nice and driven around and pampered until I had to go to this place called Moramanga. And at Moramanga, it's kind of like, okay, now you're on your own. You've been here for, probably 4 weeks. And so Zara and I got on a taxi Bruce, which is, kind of the standard. It's a 15 passenger van that you put about 30 people in and all the luggage on the top. And you just crowd in and go. And they said that we got you the limo model. The other model's worse. But anyway, it was an experience to ride there to a mining town about 4 hours away and going around turns and just relating to the people in their own context. And then in Moramanga, I got served fresh cooked whole fish like 3 out of 4 meals in a row, which for me was just delicious. And I slept in a place where my church had provided them with water on their campus of this girls' school and college. And we provided them with water and a kitchen. And they're so poor. One of the requests when I came back this time, could you give us a clothesline? I mean, don't take anything for granted, I guess. But anyway, one of the things they did, since we provided them the hot water, they figured out how to, the water tank and well, they figured out how to do hot water. And they were so proud of that. But being there and teaching and eating the food and interacting with kids, we started our day at 5:30 in the morning with devotions. And it's a girls' school. So all these girls come down, like 20 girls come down. They probably woke up 5 minutes ago. And it's my job to teach them for 30 minutes. And so it provided a challenge for a non-morning dude to do that and to do that in a fun way. And but every experience was a challenge. That one in that mining town was a lot of fun. And I saw a lot of good being done. The church there has a pastor that their only job is to hang out with prostitutes because it's a mining town. These guys are getting lump sums of money and they want their women, and the women don't necessarily want them. And so I saw, like a lot of people think of churches, oh, they just want self-survival or this or that. But that was a purely missional thing they did, was to seek to provide a safe place for the women. And the girls' school was founded that way too. So I saw a lot of good, interacted with a lot of people, and also taught 50 teachers there that came from the country and from the cities. And that was fascinating. And made lifelong friends with the dean, just some incredible people. And so the teaching was fun. And after like the third fish dinner, I'm stuffed and we're late. And so instead of walking from town, we had to take like a rickshaw to get us back. And we take that and go straight into teaching. And there's 50 undergraduate students that don't give a heck about having a class like at 1:30 in the afternoon and don't know us from Adam. And after like a lot of good teaching, I was bombing. I was just, it was tanking and I had no gas. It's, you're thinking, okay, turn it on. You got to catch this crowd. And it was like, there's nothing in the tank. So the translator Zara starts coming in, and then the dean walked in the room, and she saved us. Just her very presence, gave enough time for me to take a deep breath, get us on track, and then we had a phenomenal time after that. The thing about Malagasy classes is they're at least 2 hours, if not 4 hours. And if they're 2 hours, they don't want to waste time and take a break. So you are teaching. And if you're sinking, you're going to continue to sink for a while. There's things that we've learned in the course, and dividing up in groups and things like that, and bringing back and using drama and art and things like that, which mixed it up too. But that, I'm sorry, I could go on, but Moramongo was a great, for the diversity of people taught, and for not succeeding as well as succeeding, because I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Tim. I think it's really valuable to have those experiences, like what you said there towards the end about the woman who came in and she was kind of working with the students a bit. It gave you a moment to just collect your thoughts, calm down a little bit, and then you were able to have a really solid lesson.
Yeah.
It's really valuable to be willing to share the ups and the downs, because we all go through that as teachers, of course. So let's open it up to some questions. I'm gonna hand it over to Kelly. She's been kind of keeping an eye on things. So if any of you have questions that you want to drop in the chat box for Tim, feel free. And Kelly will read them out.
While we're kind of waiting, if anybody wants to, while we're waiting for people to drop questions in the chat, do you have any advice for somebody who wanted to go and volunteer teach in a place they've never been?
Yeah, be flexible, and be flexible some more, and have a sense of humor. The things change all the time. Also, if you're a volunteer and if you're looking for paid positions, one of the things I found in my going is, I taught all this for free, but I've got probably 400 Facebook friends from Madagascar right now, and a lot of them want to speak English better, and the English clubs too. I could probably, if I wanted to, do that for pay just through the contacts I made there, and have a pretty steady job. So volunteering sometimes can be a means to the end. More quick advice is it's good to have an anchor in that country, whether it's your school, or if you know a family or a friend, or if you meet somebody. It's that just really helps. And then one of the things I did, just to remind me, I have this wristband on still, and it says, "Let love guide you in all you do." And when I get frustrated or whatever, I think, well, what's the loving response here? What's what's the way to be? And
Yeah, that's cool.
so that continues. I try to continue to let that guide my life, in traffic and out of it.
Very cool. Okay, we've got a question from Kim. Kim, do you want to just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask?
Sure. I was just wondering, Tim, what you did as far as structuring lessons and trying to pull in any materials. Did you have anything available to you? Was it just a whiteboard? How did you handle that aspect of teaching?
Well, part of it was from Whitney. I knew that if I didn't have anything else, if I took a ball, I could do something. And I packed and I did pack whiteboards, one as big as my suitcase, two as big as my suitcase, and then I was going to take some smaller boards. One of the advices with the boards is you can get two-sided whiteboards. Don't just settle for one side. That way you can put a question or a symbol on one side and an answer or a response, or you can write it in as the students are doing it, and you're not like switching up things. So get a two-sided whiteboard. My suitcase held something like 16 by 18 or 12 by 18. It was good size. And so I had some activities. I really didn't have any lesson plans. I made them up myself. And I've been a pastor for 30 some, almost 40 years. And so basically what I did is I took the Christian religion and I tried to put it in 4 sentences. And then from those 4 sentences, I got 10 vocabulary words. And from those 10 vocabulary words, I got 10 Bible stories. And then it kind of got organic from there. And then the other, I taught for national staff. And so the client was the head of all the finance, personnel, and property of that denomination. She said, these people, they're not volunteers, but these people are working for nothing. And they're giving their heart and soul, and it's hard, and it's easy to get tired and burned out. By the way, 90% of people in Madagascar make less than $2 a day. So when we're talking about they don't make much, they don't make much. And so one of my favorite passages in the Bible has this line, serve the Lord with gladness. And I started with that line and made a lesson plan and showed it to Whitney, and she said it didn't stink. Here's how to make it better. And so I worked on making it a little bit better to the point where I was really proud of it. And we'll probably use that as a model as I'm thinking through developing subsequent lessons.
Cool.
So,
Very cool.
yeah, I hung through and I did it on demand. Over there, I mean, I was singing and dancing, except for experience in life.
Good. Keith has an interesting question. Keith, do you want to unmute quick and go ahead and ask that one?
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm guessing it was many beginners, but I'm sure some people knew some English, but with classes at such massive size, it's impossible to have similar skill levels. You can't just try and hit one single group in it. And I know you had the interpreter, like how did you kind of handle that type of situation, knowing how much English to use or not use? And
Well, I had a really unfortunate experience again, and that is I went to the top graduate school, the Harvard of Madagascar, to teach. And their dean was out of it. He wasn't really ready he didn't know what was going on. So he says, oh, hi, go in that room and teach this. And I was prepared to teach 125 people. And this was like a study hall. And he tells me to go in there and teach. And he told me I went an hour early to prepare. So he was the president of the seminary. And then there, and I do a halfway decent job, but there's no way to do skill level or anything like that. And then I have another bad experience where the dean came in to translate, but he was getting phone calls and text and called to the door. And so it was so bad that the dean really did good stuff. The next day he got 7 or 8 of his best English speakers, and we had a translation team. And that was so fun, again, for teaching afterwards. But that's where I met Newfie and some other people that are my best friends today. And so when somebody on that team was getting drained or they didn't have the English level to translate into Malagasy, somebody else would. And so we did translate for those that were less able in English, but we also challenged and we all, it was up to me not to lean totally on the translator, to allow silence, to let people catch up, to let people work in pairs to improve their English. But when I went to Mandrit Sara, that place 3 days drive, the whole English translation team, which I learned previously, was everybody who spoke English in that seminary, and there were only 7 people out of 70 some. And again, we got so close to each other, and there was a spouse of a seminarian that was a systems engineer. And so she was working fluently in English in her job before she gave it up to be a pastor's life and move out to the mountains. And so basically I was a lead teacher, but I had about at least a 1 to 10 ratio under me that they could help with the less fluent students. And I was always available after class. And people absorbed, they were drinking through a fire hose, and so was I, and so it was a short-term type thing. And they helped each other out. We all did. I mean, over there, it's not the luxury of American individualism. It's a community thing.
Mm,
And,
a
they
lot
would
of
say if there were one
everybody
person,
helping. Yeah.
yeah. And in a lot
Yeah,
of places,
that's
they
good.
say if one person could not speak English well, then the whole seminary could not speak English. They really rise and fall together. It's a different thing than what we have in the United States.
Yeah, different thinking. Can you tell us again what was on your wristband?
Let everything be done in love.
Let everything be done in love. That's very
Mhm.
beautiful. Yeah.
It's from the Bible, I think, 1st or 2nd Corinthians 16:14. It's rubbed off except for the heart now. It's been so worn that all I got is a heart there instead of the inscribing. But I took about 300 of these wristbands and I gave them out, especially to those people that were fluent in English, because they are written in
Mm.
English. And that was a great prize. It cost me under $10 for 225, I think, So I guess that's another
So,
tip. Bring some cheap swag. It goes a long way.
Sarah, it's let everything be done in love. I put it in the chat for us.
Okay.
So you can see it too if you click the
Mhm.
chat box. Yeah. So um
Great.
yes. Smiley with hearts. Exactly. It's a cool saying. Um
Very
good. Any other questions for Tim? Good.
Right. Are we ready to move on to Kim? All right. So I'm gonna let Kelly and Kim continue this conversation, and I'll hop in later and handle some questions. So same thing like we did with Tim here. If you've got questions as Kim is sharing about her experience, feel free to just go ahead and drop them in the chat. Okay.
Good. Okay, Kim,
Yes. Hello.
can you give us like a little recap, like where were you? When were you? Tell us a little overall about your volunteer experience.
Sure. So I started what piqued me and got me looking to do this kind of work was the war in Ukraine, actually, and just wanting to do something. And if you've watched my videos, you've seen this before, but it's just like, what can you do from here? I'm in Massachusetts. What can you do? And I happened to pop onto this Facebook group, which interestingly enough is still headed by a person who's now a student in this TEFL program, which I think is really cool. But she was the one, Leora. I don't know if you've seen her name around, but she posted and just asked for volunteers to teach English. So I thought, you know what? This is something I can do from here. And there were people just coming over with very little. And we know that in the United States, although now there is a lot more Spanish, there's not really very much, a very big community for these people to come into. And a lot of them need to find jobs and start working. So there's a big need, and I just jumped on board with that and started volunteering with a student online. So we met over Zoom and did classes over Zoom I learned a little bit about Zoom because I'm not really a techie kind of online person at all. I much prefer meeting people face to face, but it was really, really something that was fulfilling. So that led me to looking at this as maybe kind of a second job for me, not really a career, but a part-time, job that I was very picky about in my old age. It had to be a passion. And I found that very quickly that for me, teaching English and helping people was a passion. And that was the way I could give back to this community. So I started working with that one student and, okay, I'm going to get my certification, I'm going to do this, but I started just looking around for jobs for pay because I thought, it would be nice to do that as well. And I saw the TEFL certification come up as a requirement in a lot of jobs here stateside. Sometimes even more so in programs, even more so than like a quote unquote teaching degree. But that really did open a lot of doors for me. So in addition to working with that student, I started putting feelers out for possible jobs and ended up volunteering and helping in a program, which I now have a paid job in. I just did my first class last night, but it is in a town called, thank you, Framingham, Massachusetts, and they have a very, very large adult ESL program there. It's funded by the state of Massachusetts. They fill a middle school at night and a couple other schools during the day. They do online day and evening classes, always wanting volunteers. And so I jumped on that. What a wonderful community. All these people are kind of like-minded like us. It's kind of a calling. For us, we're not traveling right now, but it just was so incredible, the wraparound services they have for these people coming in. So to see from going to an individual thing to a huge school, which by the way has about 1,100 people on a waiting list to get in to this program. So it's just huge. And volunteering with that, I just got to learn a ton and help out in the classes, and everyone, is just so appreciative. And they don't, it's free for the people to go there, but they're very strict about attendance because they do have 1,100 people waiting for a spot. So that's kind of where I landed with that volunteer work, which did lead to a job. So it's just 2 nights a week. The classes are 3-hour classes, which was a little bit challenging to plan those. But fantastic program. I mean, I couldn't be more pleased just how everything kind of came full circle from starting with that one student to now, being able to actually work and do what I love and make a little bit of money on the side, but still in that same vein of why I got involved with the volunteering in the first place. So that's basically where I'm at right now.
Great. It sounds like it's been a really rewarding experience already for you. A lot of growth there too. It sounds like, going from 1 to now teaching like 3 hours, getting paid and everything. It's like quite an experience. Yeah.
And I still keep, I still have my Ukrainian student. She's working now. She just got a job. They're opening this brand new luxury hotel in Boston, the first one in North America. I think they have them all over the world in the Far East and, Dubai and stuff like that. But just to see her go from where she came with her English and being afraid to talk to, I had some connections and someone was able to get her a job at a country club this summer, and just being around English speakers, she just took off. And it was just so, last time I saw her, I was like, your English is like really, it was just so nice to see that. So yeah, it's rewarding.
Really rewarding.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a highlight to me. Do you have any other highlights to share with us about your experience doing this? Like, what are the best parts of doing this?
I think for me, one of the best parts, and something that was really one of those things that make you go, oh yeah, these people that are coming here to this country and really want to be successful and want to work, and they have come from, most of them, from jobs in their country where they were engineers and, pretty highly educated jobs. And now I can't say that like they're humbling themselves, because they're just so grateful for everything you do. But, here you are, an engineer, and now you're a painter, or here you are, you're an environmentalist, and now you're cleaning warehouses. And they're just so eager to learn. And appreciative, and it's an adult population. You know, I was an elementary school nurse, and so I love kids, but I was kind of looking for something a little different. So yeah, it's great where I love working with adults. They just, you know, and probably 90% are Brazilian, so Portuguese speaking, here in the Boston area. Although now we do have a lot from Central America, China, and also Ukraine and Russia as well. So those are kind of the languages that I'm seeing, but they all are just, they're motivated, they're eager to learn, they're so grateful. They bring in great food sometimes from their, so that's a nice little perk, right? I keep hearing about this Brazilian barbecue, and I'm like, okay, guys, we're gonna have to plan a Thanksgiving or something and have some Brazilian. But yeah, so that's been just very, you know, very rewarding.
Very cool. Very cool. Churrasco, the Brazilian barbecue.
Yeah.
Do you have like any advice if somebody's thinking about going to find a volunteer role? Do you have any like words of wisdom for somebody who's looking at following this kind of experience?
I did a lot of cold calling at first because I just didn't know what was out there. And it's funny because in my search, even the big program that I'm working in now, I didn't really find that very easily. And all of a sudden, in just a Google search, I stumbled upon it. But if you check with local libraries, community ed, I think Whitney had said one time, like community colleges even, that will have classes on campus. There's a lot, what I see around here, a lot of conversation groups that utilize volunteers to lead conversation. There's all different levels of conversation, from beginner or level 0 all the way up through business English. And so there's a nice position there. Like especially if you have a specialty and been in the business world, people are really hungry for that kind of stuff. My town, not my town, but the next town over has in their adult community ed also an ESL class, and they're just getting that off the ground. I do also work for them, and that's a much, only an hour and a half lesson and a little bit easier to plan those lessons. But yeah, that's out there. It's just really, I always like, this is a Mother Teresa saying to him, but just to look no further than your own backyard, and you'd be really surprised what you find. And I don't know if it's just because I'm in the Boston area. It's kind of, I don't know if that's probably more unique than if you were in the middle of the United States, where you're not getting as many people coming in at a steady stream like we are here. But
Right. Are we ready to move to questions? Yeah. Okay. Just one thing, just bouncing off what you said there, Kim, about location. I will say that, I'm from a small town in North Carolina, and when I moved back from Southeast Asia, I was astounded by how many Thai people I started meeting in North Carolina. And I feel like there's something to that idea of, like, when you start looking for something, you start finding it.
right.
and just kind of, I soon realized that there are several hundred Thai people that live in North Carolina, and I would never guessed that initially. So yeah, I think that your experience is very helpful for folks that are currently in the States or in other countries that might take in refugees or have a high immigrant population, that there are opportunities out there for sure. So we had some questions come in from Lauren. Lauren, would you like to unmute yourself and just share with Kim?
Hey, hi, Kim.
Hi.
So I really appreciate hearing about your experience. So you went from teaching, you were volunteer teaching one-on-one, and then now you have the paid position. So this is in person?
Yeah, I have been doing in-person classes right now, and I did start in that school as a volunteer. They're desperate for volunteers, and so they're pretty flexible as far as you don't have to work both nights, you don't have to stay the whole 3 hours, you can work 2 hours. So
Wow.
any place like that, I think, yeah, it works out as far as their need for people.
And so these are group classes. There's more than one person.
Yes, so these are group classes in this school. I have 18 students in my level. It's a level 3 plus class, so it's right in that B1, B2 kind of class. And then the one I teach at the other community ed is a level 0. And I mean, we're brand new, so it's a whole range of it's just totally different. And the first time when I walked in and I'm like, these people don't even know like cat, dog, mouse or whatever. So that was challenging, but I really learned and grew a lot from that, from having to do that, because I'm like, okay, we're starting with nothing. So yeah.
So how was it going from having a one-on-one student to a group in person?
It was, I mean, it was different, and there's good and bad, right? The one-on-one, they get a lot of your individual attention, but in group, it's a lot easier to cultivate conversation among classmates, and not only be talking with me, but having that experience of talking with your classmates. You also, like we learned in the, there's a range of ability, even in the level 3 plus class. I have students who are ready to just take off and, do debates and everything. And then I have some that are still struggling a little bit with some vocabulary and some of the, grammar points and everything. So that, I think, is very common in probably a lot of classes that you'll find yourself teaching. But so there's good and bad, but I have to say that I enjoy the group, of having a little bit more people to work with, so we can do things like partnering and, have those nice group projects and things that you can do. It's harder to do with one person.
So are there people of different nationalities in the same class? Like they're not all with the same background?
I have to say that in the class I'm at that has 18 students now, I think I have about maybe 60% Brazilian and 40% Spanish. So from
Wow.
Central America, and then I have like a Chinese speaker and a Ukrainian speaker. So very heavy Brazilian population here right now. But if you get down, one of the schools I observed in Boston had a much more mix of all different kinds of nationalities. It's a specific language school, but they had a lot of, 5 or 6 different nationalities in a class of 12.
So you don't speak any, do you speak all English, like 100% English in your
I
class?
do, yes. And one interesting thing I found when I was looking around is that, they call it like the L1. Do you speak the students L1, Spanish or Portuguese? I'm like, no, I'm English only. And so that does work out a little bit better for the more advanced classes. I found when you have level 0, thank God for Google Translate, but I think it's helpful. Those students can whip that right out pretty quickly too. But
Yeah.
but they do, and I let them use their phones. I'm like, if you need to look up so you can make some connection in your mind between your L1 and English, then please, by all means, do it. Because and it's funny because one of the classes that a woman brings her son, and he's a teenager and has been living here for a few years, so he also can help translate from Portuguese or Spanish. A lot of my Spanish speakers can understand too. If they don't understand, he'll explain to them. So he's kind of like my helper. But yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And do you create all the lesson plans, or do they give you any teaching materials at all?
They have what they call placemats, and so it's material that you're supposed to cover. But as far as how you do that is up to you. They do have a grammar book that I get the feel that it's a little loosely used. There's so much online I found for free as far as worksheets and stuff like that that you can just download, print off. I search free worksheets for verb to be for level 3+ or whatever, and it will. They all pop up. You can print them.
Are these placemats, Kim? Is it kind of compiled into a textbook that the program gives you, or is it?
No, it looks like this, but it's on a regular piece of printer paper. But because of the program that I work at in Framingham is funded by the state, there are certain criteria that you do have to teach. So it's not only just language, but it's also, how to fill out job applications. And it's a lot of practical things like that. Different, how do you, figure out a doctor appointment and be able to describe things that are going to be really relevant for people who are coming that they really should know how to do, they're coming to live here. Grocery stores, making grocery lists, finding sales. So there's we do have the placemat that has different things, saying, accepting and giving invitations, apologizing, job interviewing, things like that.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Those practical elements that we want to tick off the list for folks that are in the country. So Tim had a question as well. Tim, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, I guess the question is, how has the teaching affected who you are as a human being?
That's a good question. I think I would harken back a little bit to what I said before, just about realizing I'm trying to think what you said, because I wrote it down because I really liked it. Don't take anything for granted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you see these people coming from these countries, and we do get to interview some of our students and just meet with them. That was one thing I did as a volunteer in the big program, just meet with them one-on-one and say, hey, kind of what's your story, and if they're willing to share. And some of the, the corruption that they're fleeing, the just being somewhere where they're safe is just really opened my eyes. And again, into the education level of these people. I mean, you hear that, oh, they're coming. It's just, I guess it just really kind of hits home to me. It's like, our hearts need to be open to these people. They're so willing to work. I asked, what things people had in common. One of the things, my whole class, and I only had 15 instead of 18, they love their jobs. How many times do you hear people say that, And I think, and these are the people that are, I said, again, painters, the carpenters, the dog groomers, the warehouse cleaners, and who have highly educated degrees in their own country, and they come here and they're just so grateful. So I think that it really, I guess it kind of hits home for me personally, just that, everybody just wants kind of the same thing. We all have this commonality, and it's just that we can't take what we have here for granted, because although it's very easy to complain, you just, when you hear some of these stories, it's just like, wow. And good for these people for getting up at 5 and going to paint and work and carpentry all day, and then coming and sitting in class till 9:30 p.m., So, yeah.
It makes a difference having students in the classroom that sincerely want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
They can instantly apply their learnings to their daily life.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, we do have one other question that I think applies to both of you. So, Sarah, I don't know if you would like to hop on here and chat, but it sounds like you're interested in hearing about how do we adapt for larger sizes, maybe if we're used to a smaller size.
Yeah, and I just want to say too, thank you. This has been such a great blend of people who are working actually in that overseas space, but also I've got a lot out of Kim, like working from home. So, you know, or staying in her home country or town. So it was more like, for example, like for Tim, like when you know, like you've got 250 people have just turned up, do you kind of then kind of go away and do a quick prep plan of what you think you're going to use? I had a few questions. You know, does the interpreter hold the flow, or you know, how do you work with the interpreter if you've got to keep interpreting? And yeah, do you then go midway, oh, this isn't, you know, the class isn't really taking this because you've got 250 people? I'm just curious on that side of it too, please.
All right. Well, there's several things I think with a large group that you can do, and Whitney was very helpful with this. Not only was it a large group, but they met in a large church where we were in rows, in pews, not individual seats that you could move. And I saw that as a liability, and Whitney kind of said, you know, it makes transition time a lot less. They just have to turn around and face each other. But some of the things that I learned, I'm a creature of paper. In Madagascar, it's an oral culture. So I did teach differently. I learned how to teach later on. They teach for the students to memorize. But I always had paper. I felt good, and I could get a photocopy in Madagascar for less than 2 cents a copy. And so I did copy a handout. And after I met my friends, they would translate that to Malagasy too. And so you could have an English and a Malagasy handout. What I did at the first of classes, I started with singing, because in their culture, music is really big, and the singing kind of was our icebreaker. When you've got that many people, it's kind of hard to do an icebreaker, but when we sing together, we kind of bond together, and so did that. And then, different than what I do in the United States, I wrote a script of the flow, and I emailed it to the translators, and they translated it. They were so good they could do it in a matter of hours. Like I've taken several languages, and it would take me days, you know, to translate a 2 to 4 hour class, and they could do it overnight, no problem. And so that limited me to having to stay with the script, which has positives and negatives because I like to get off track. But I had to have my act together. Then the translator had their act together. Then we taught it, and we interacted great together. We were best friends, really. And so our chemistry, I had 3 different translators, and our chemistry was always good. But I would always divide into groups of 4. And because it was in a church, it had a center aisle, and I could divide into left side, right side. And we did have some games and some competition. And I also divided into quadrants, because one of the things I was teaching was 4 different styles of biblical leadership. And it was after biblical characters, such as Ruth and David, Moses, Paul. And so they could each study one and bring it to the whole. And what they most identified, they could stand up from where they were and get a little kinesthetic movement, even with a large group. So those are a few of the things I found it. And then we had, like we're doing now, we had a mic up front, and people who wanted to ask a question would have to come up to the mic to ask it or write it down, because the introverted students, that would be their idea of hell. And so that brought, you know, that got us off the script and onto some things that were particularly of interest to students, and the translators just had to do the best they could. And it's hard, you know, for them. I'm not the clearest speaker, even though I do speak in public. I'm not, and they did a great job, I think. I can't prove
Thank you.
otherwise.
That's and just a question for Kim, if I could please, sorry, about the, and I don't know, Whitney might also be able to input. When I looked at volunteering, like through Zoom for like a country one, they wanted something like, and because we're in Australia, the dollar exchange rate's not fantastic, but I think I have to pay something like, I don't know, $300 to join. Is that normal? Is that something? I mean, they seemed like a very legit. This one was in, I think, in Brazil, and it was to teach the young girls that were coming so they could get good jobs, like in hotels. Is that, obviously I'm over here, you guys are over there. Is there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that, Kim, because I have not heard of like paid volunteering where you have to pay into it unless it's a travel program. I mean, we hear about voluntourism where people will take a trip somewhere similar to what Tim did a trip, and so obviously that had to be financed, and he wasn't being paid for his teaching. But to just work from your home country or work online, I have not heard of that. Kim, have you?
No. It raised a little red flag for me, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, because even the volunteering, I mean, Whitney, that you would have at the beginning of the coaching calls and stuff, if anything, they should be trying to get you all hooked up to get online. And, if you were going to be offering that service on a volunteer basis, I would think, I don't know, but I have not come across that, no, of having to pay. And the group that I did go to was just a Facebook group who, just asked for volunteers, and Leora, who was heading it, just matched us up. And I guess all I really had to quote unquote pay for was Zoom, so I could get more than an hour lesson, but I just used my husband. That's why sometimes when I come on, I'm Michael Nolan and not myself, but
yeah.
But
and we all have Zoom normally. Yeah. No, that's great. I was just curious. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question, Sarah. Good question. And now Wendy has asked a question. Wendy, do you mind if can I summarize quickly here with Tim?
Sure.
Hop through it. Yeah. So Tim, you remember when you were talking about how you planned that lesson and you had like 10 vocab words and, you were kind of whittling down a structure. Could just like real quick, could you run Wendy through that one more time? She thought that was a cool idea. You're muted. Hold on. Let me unmute you. Nope, you're muted.
There we go. Well, I use the basic lesson style that TEFLPros teaches. I would always start with some kind of ice-breaking activity and use group work and let students teach each other as well as me be the teacher. I'm sorry, I've been away from the coursework itself. Another thing I did is I developed a one-page cheat sheet. I wrote everything I learned in TEFL on one page.
Yeah,
I could have it handy when I was doing my lessons. And there's one towards lesson, I guess it's around lesson 4 or 5. It's not the PDP, but the other one. And then it gets into there's something where you kind of realize or experience as one of the steps.
Speaking lessons. Mm-hmm.
And what I was going for was transformation, that people would get ahas as well as get content. And so I kind of tried to teach towards that, and also look at the end, what do I want them to come away with, and then kind of work backwards too, to make sure that I had the steps. Well, what Whitney helped me a lot with was layering, and what's the other thing? Chunking you call it, or layering. And that really helped me to be more clear, because I'm usually circling or swerving instead of layering and chunking. And Whitney, I appreciate your honesty, because it was very helpful. To maybe we should think about this, and so that helped a lot.
Tim, can I just ask you, I was wondering if you would just say it was like 4 different things and you did one thing and that led to something and that led to something and that led to something. I just wanted to hear that exact
Bible stories.
the Bible stories, and then it was vocabulary, and I just
Oh,
wanted to hear
it
again.
changed. It changed. I couldn't do something 10 times the same way. I'm just not.
Oh,
that-
but could you say again just what you did that
Okay,
one time?
well, what I
Let me interject here just for a moment. So this call is recorded. So
Okay.
you'll be able to rewatch
Oh, okay.
if it's not something that he can immediately pull back up. Tim, is it something that's fresh on your mind or no?
Well, very simply, I had 4 major propositions.
Okay.
And then 10 vocabulary words, 10 scriptures.
Mhm.
And what I did is with the scriptures, I taught different ways where sometimes they would have a writing exercise, sometimes they would have a speaking exercise. The thing that surprised me the most, I thought I was reaching out on a limb to do skits. And the Malagasy people love to act. I was hoping that one group would share their skit, and we're in a classroom with over 70 people in groups of 4 or 5. They begged me to not to work overtime, but to keep them over their break till they could run to their next class so they could see more skits. And then they begged, could we finish the next morning early? And so everybody got to do the acting. And I knew that in America, with undergraduate students asked to act out something, or graduate students, and well, you get a few, but it was universally accepted and they learned a lot from that, and the energy level went up the roof. So I would have a different activity with one of the 10 scriptures, not always the same. And I looked at listening, speaking, reading, writing, and just incorporated those in, even though I didn't have, my objective was more than teaching English. English was part of what I was doing.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. That was a wonderful recap. Before we hop off here, I am going to drop a link in the chat box for you all. Please click the link as we sit here for the last minute or so of the call. It has a couple of questions on it that you can just click through to answer. Give us your preferences for the next continuing connections call. We'd really appreciate it if you could just take a second and fill that out before we wrap things up tonight. So while folks are filling that out, I just want to say a big thank you to Tim and Kim for joining us, and a huge thank you to Kelly. This whole thing was Kelly's idea, guys. All right, so we wouldn't be here without Kelly spearheading this event. So thank you, Kelly.